Okay, thus far we've covered the entire Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, Judges, and we're now up to, we've went through the book of Ruth, which gave us a little bit of hope, and at the very end mentions the beginning or alludes to David. So you can see from a textual standpoint, you really can't refer to something unless it's already occurred, right? Historically speaking. So, the book of Ruth is set in the period of the time of the Judges, but at the end, it does mention Jesse and David right in the last chapter. So, we have some reason to believe it was at least redacted past that point in time, had to have been. So we're up to 1 Samuel. This is where we're going to start taking the people of God, and they're going to start becoming more like other people, not like the time of Judges, not in a tribal sort of fashion. They're going to get a king. This will change things. To get ourselves historically situated with this book, it's roughly a 500-year period from about 1050 BC until the Babylonian captivity about 586 BC. This will be the time of them having a kingdom of sorts. We'll see the centralization of worship at the great temple in Jerusalem, which eventually it is somewhat destroyed at the time of the captivity, but is finally destroyed in 70 AD by the Romans, not ever to be rebuilt again. Those of you who've been to the Holy Land and been to the Western Wall, that is essentially what is left, and that's not ever been rebuilt. Some people talk about rebuilding it. I don't know. So we begin the book of 1 Samuel with already familiar, favored, fertile wife, barren wife story that we have already seen. This is a theme where, God can work his grace to bring good things out of things that are apparently sterile or not full of life. Shiloh is the hub of worship in the time of this book of 1 Samuel. And Hannah prays and promised she would have a Nazarite child if she were given a child. So it's this sort of prayer. Now, many of us do this. We make bargains with God. I do it all the time. If you do this and that, God, I'll do this, that, and the other. And, Well, so this is the thing. Eli blesses her, and Samuel comes. Samuel's born to Hannah. Samuel is dedicated to a life of worshiping God, and all the proper sacrifices are made. It's good. If you look in the book of 1 Samuel, that the prayer of Hannah, what does it look like? It's the Magnificat. That's where the Magnificat comes from. So if you look in the book of Luke at the Magnificat, and then look in 1 Samuel at this prayer, it's not a coincidence. Hannah prayed and said, "My heart exalts in the Lord, my strength is exalted in my God. My mouth derides my enemies because I rejoice in my victory. There is no holy one like the Lord, no one besides you. There is no rock like our God. Talk no more so very proudly, let not arrogance come from your mouth. The Lord is a God of knowledge. By him actions are weighted. The bows of the mighty are broken. The feeble gird on strength." Do I need to read any more? You get it. It's the Magnificat. That's the basis for the Magnificat. I don't think anybody argues that point. So, even when Samuel's a little boy, he gets dressed up. They dress him up like a priest. He wears his ephod. He's got his little costume, his liturgical clothes, and he's this his whole life. So this is unusual. In the old Catholic Church, the priest began training. I went to school with people that went to high school seminary. Start very, very early in life. We don't see that so much anymore until people, they do a bachelor's degree somewhere and go off to Nashotah House and do their 3 years. They're men by this point. They're grown men. But in the older tradition, the priests were trained from a very early age, and people went into religious orders at very early ages. 12, 13 years old, not uncommon. So, and then that's even in my lifetime. It's not that far ago. So, A man of God comes to Eli and recounts all of God's deeds. Then it's noted how poor of a job Eli's group is doing at worshiping God. So punishment's going to come. With the death of his two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, at the same time, God is going to raise up a holy priest to serve him. Who do you think that might be? I'm guessing it's Samuel. In chapter 3 of 1 Samuel, Samuel is called. And that's what, if we think about ordination, what is it? It's to be called. So there's a certain amount of this you do on your own. I mean, obviously, we all kind of push our own agendas along. But essentially, it's to be called. That's where the thing is. You have to be called by the church. He hears God speaking, and he doesn't know who it is. So he hears this voice almost in a dream at the time. And he says, "Here I am." What he thinks this is his master calling, or someone's calling him. It's God. It's a whole little story unto itself. "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." These are the words of Samuel. So, that's the thing with Revelation. Sometimes we don't always get it. Possibly there's times God is speaking to us, and we either mistake it for something else, miss the opportunity, we just don't see it. I probably do this a lot. The house of Eli is in large trouble. It'll make your ears tingle. He allowed his sons to be engaged in blasphemy. So this does not work out. The Lord remains at Shiloh and was manifest to Samuel, who is now a priest and prophet. All of Israel, that means all the people of God, all listen to Samuel. So he's respected by the people as a prophet. Always want to be careful with prophets. Whenever somebody stands up and says, "Thus saith the Lord our God," just be careful. Chapter 4 delves into the Ark of God, and it's being stolen by the Philistines. It's a little different of a story there. But in the process, Hophni and Phinehas are dropped dead. Eli, hearing the news of the ark, falls out of his chair and breaks his neck and dies. So, there you go. We meet poor Ichabod. That's a whole other story we'll come back to. So the Philistines learn about the Ark of God at Ashdod. It's a powerful object. Those of you that have, you've seen Raiders of the Lost Ark, this is Hollywood's view of how this might have been. I don't know how it was. But it apparently carried a lot of power, and it scared people. So this ark is in the hands of the Philistines for a period of time. After 7 months, it's caused such problems for them because it's not with the people of God. And the Philistines are not the people of God. So they've had plagues. They've had all kinds of bad stuff has happened to them. They've gotten tumors. They've had rats in there. It's an allusion back to all the plagues of Egypt. That's what happens to the Philistines when they try to hold on to the ark. The ark has to be in the proper place. I mean, you could think of this, in a way for us, it's different, but the Blessed Sacrament and the tabernacle. Now, we don't ascribe, crazy things happening, but we treat it in a certain way, and it's not, we just don't let certain things happen to it. We're very respectful of it, and we expect other people to be. So it's similar. The Ark of God is sent back to the people. So the Israelites are fighting with the Philistines. The ark ends up with the Philistines, and it comes back to the people. You can't look into it. Anybody that's tried to look into this thing is killed. So 70 people killed. The Levites are the only ones that can handle it properly. The ordained priests are the people of God. So, and again, same with us. We don't let just anybody get into the tabernacle. It really is only supposed to be the ordained clergy. I know sometimes things happen, but it's supposed to be the ordinandi are supposed to be the only ones that are getting into the tabernacle and handling the Blessed Sacrament in general. So when the ark is back where it's supposed to be, we get 20 years of peace. It's good. But the Israelites have to put away their fake gods, their Baals, B-A-A-L-S, and their astrotests. They're just little made-up idols to notice God. There's a lot of fertility gods in the Middle East. Gods of rain, gods of things growing, little gods they make and put around the place. But to be in the people of God, to be part of Israel, you can't be doing that. That's idolatry. Remember the 10 Commandments. So, Astar or Ishtar is the female counterpart of the male god, Baal. There's many Baals. But there's a female aspect of this. And the female part, as you can imagine, always is a fertility type worship. Rain, things grow. This is very common amongst people. Not supposed to be with the people of God. The people of God are always managing to get sideways because they're going to experience all the same things that other people experience. Drought, trouble with crops, pests, whatever. And you think, if I just say a few prayers to the fertility god, I don't know, it seems to work for that guy over there. So you can't do that, though. You cannot do that. Samuel prays and offers to God properly. And when he does this, the Philistines have no chance against him and his people. That's the point they're trying to make. If Israel worships the way it's supposed to, according to the books of Moses, according to the Mosaic covenant, they should do well. When they don't do well, the only conclusion to be drawn is we're not honoring the covenant somehow. It's got to be sin. And that's the way they see things in general. By chapter 8, Samuel is now an old man. It happens kind of suddenly in the text. We go from little baby Samuel to Samuel's an old man, in just a few chapters. But that's the way the text is. And he has misbehaving sons. The people want a king. So the people of God are looking around. There's all kinds of civilizations around them, Philistines being one of them, but others. They have kings. They have stuff. The people of God think they need to have that sort of thing. They want kings. They want rulers. We want to be like the Philistines. Why can't we be like the Canaanites? Well, look at the Babylonians over here. They have all this stuff. Why can't we be like everybody else? Well, and that's eventually what they're going to want to do. They don't really want God to be their king. That's the sad part. They want an earthly king. Well, they will get one. Chapter 9 comes Saul. He meets with Samuel and the game is on. Chapter 10, he's anointed king and the power of the Lord will be upon him. Now, we all know Saul's a tragic figure. He never really does very well in the text. Saul performs the cut it up and send it around maneuver on some ox to all of Israel. It's kind of an intimidation tactic. You cut this beast up and send it all around the place, and I'm in charge, and look what I can do, sort of thing. Saul never really assumes the kingship. You never feel like it's a very complete fashion. He's king, but I don't know. So fear of the Lord is on the people. Hundreds of thousands, according to the text, rally to Saul, and they win. Chapter 11, verse 14 is curious, in that they renew the kingship. It's odd because the kingship is brand new anyway, so that's sort of a strange piece of text there. Samuel recounts everything God has done with the people. We've seen this in other books of the Bible. We start out, sometimes you can start out with Adam, or you start out with the Exodus. God brought his people across the Red Sea on dry land, killed Pharaoh, we were in the desert, we crossed the Jordan. You recount everything. And that's how they know themselves. That's their mnemonic history of the redemptive history of the people of God. And you have to remember, most people can't read. They have to hear it. So you have to get around. The priests can read. The few of the learned people can read. They have the scrolls. But the people have to hear it. And they have to hear it fairly often because they forget. Samuel tells them, if you persist in evil, you will not do well. So, shortly thereafter, Saul becomes king at age 30 and lives to age 70, 40 years. What's 40 years? As we've already said, a long time. It's always a long time. How many days was Jesus in the desert? 40 days. It's a long time. People of God in the Negev, 40 years. So, Saul became presumptuous, disobeyed God, and now God will find a man after his own heart. Who's that going to be? It's David, right? It's going to be King David. And Samuel's kingdom and his rule begins to deteriorate rather quickly. You never even get the sense that it ever did amount to much. Again, here we see Israel does not have a modern army, even by today's standards. They're back to fighting with farm tools. They don't have real instruments of war. That's what happens. They're kind of a disarmed people. Chapter 15, Saul's instructed to totally destroy the Amalekites. But the people decide to keep some of the good stuff he keeps some of the stuff for himself. That's not how he was instructed. It's very bad. Agag the king lives. Totally destroy means not lives. So it's a story of disobedience. Chapter 15, 22, he is rejected. It's a sad story. But he's gone afoul of what God wants him to do. So let's just take a look at that, because I said in the lecture to read it, so we will. Has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Surely to obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed the fat of rams. For rebellion is no less a sin than divination, and stubbornness is like iniquity and idolatry. Because you've rejected the word of the Lord, he has also rejected you from being king. So there you go. That's it. So from this point on, Saul is done. Nothing good is going to happen to him from here on out, much. And Saul is tormented by an evil spirit. It is kind of odd. The Lord sends an evil spirit to torment him. We as moderns don't really think like that, but that's what the text says. So, Samuel has anointed David king. But Saul apparently doesn't know this. So Samuel's still in the scene. He's still the prophet and priest of the Lord, and he does anoint David. Saul's evil spirit is relieved when David plays the lyre, plays a musical instrument. This soothes him. Does he have a seizure disorder, some neurological problem? We don't really know. As a modern person, you want to think in those terms, but the text is just what it is. Chapter 17, we get the story of David and Goliath. Everybody knows this story or thinks they know the story. 6 cubits in a span is how big Goliath is. He's a giant. David says, "Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the living God?" Now David feels like if God's on his side, he's going to win. Well, that's how the story is. So David does. He goes and the Lord will be with him. And then the saying comes up. Saul has slain his thousands and David his tens of thousands. So we can see the text now, it's leaning towards the people who are on David's side. He's a more popular leader. "200 Philistine foreskins makes David Saul's son-in-law." I know these are taking off dead people, obviously. So, they're killing each other. Jonathan is the son of Saul, and he and David are good friends. So this adds a little drama to the story, but it's in the text. Saul is becoming pathetic now. We see people like this when they're really doing poorly and things are running downhill and they're clinging to power. You wish they could just gracefully leave. but they can't do that. So he has Doeg the Edomite kill 85 priests of God because the men of Israel will not do so. There's a lot of killing in this book. In chapter 23, God speaks directly to David. Go and help Keilah. David and Jonathan have made a covenant that David should be the king and Jonathan his second. So Jonathan is even agreeing to the fact David should be king. By all rights, he's the king's son. He would be the next in command. But he's saying, no, I have the sense you should be king, and then I'll back you up if that's what needs to happen. So this leans to that, he likes David. Chapter 24 is unique. David cuts off a piece of Saul's robe while he is using the bathroom. So he's somehow hiding down in somewhere and, can secretly kind of reach up. This is hard to imagine, but to show him, I could have killed you. I have had opportunities to kill you, and I have not done that. I'm trying to give you a way out of here. And Saul he's just becoming more crazy. By the time we get to chapter 25, Samuel finally dies. He's an old man. So here we are, 1 Samuel. Samuel dies. All the people are very sad. Everybody likes Samuel. We see the story of Nabal, the fool, saved by his wife Abigail. And he soon dies. Abigail's a great wife. It's a story of a good wife. At this point in the story, David has 3 wives. We don't often think about that. Now, people often know Solomon has, I believe, 700 wives and 300 concubines. I think that's the number. Hard to imagine that. But, so, Saul's daughter, Ahinoam, and Abigail. And so, Saul's daughter, Ahinoam, and Abigail are his 3 wives. Chapter 27, David has the chance to kill Saul again and does not do so. Saul is turning to divination by this point in the text. This is a very bad thing to do. So, chapter 30, the Amalekites make the mistake of attacking David's people at Ziklag. Abigail and Jezreel are taken prisoners. And the Lord says to David, go get your wives. By chapter 31, Jonathan is killed by a Philistine, and then Saul kills himself. He falls on his own sword, rather than be killed by the uncircumcised. So they have a recognition of the covenant. There's the people that are in it and the people not in it. This will become a big deal in New Testament times when we're starting to reach out to the Greek peoples and people around the Mediterranean that are not circumcised. This will all get looked at again. It's finally settled at the First Church Council of Jerusalem, but that's a long ways off. There's still a little bit of some sense of the sacred here because people are they mention the circumcision and not, so there's a sense that you can be in and out. But Saul is pretty much, he's sort of out there at this point. Okay, so that basically wraps up the book of 1 Samuel, and we'll move on to 2 Samuel in just a minute.